You are now watching Lesage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! Yo, what's poppin' peeps? Lesage here. Today we are going to be covering over the top 10 Fusion Strike decks in our standard format. So this is our last week in PTCGO, and we have the PTCG Live Beta coming up for Canadians on the 22nd. This is the last week of Fusion Strike being played on Play Limitless. So these are going to be the last Fusion Strike. Next week we should have Brilliant Stars decks, and that's going to be exciting. Now the big question that a lot of people are probably going to be asking, is Mew VMAX going to be the top deck this week? Well, we will be covering over every single deck in the entire top 10 in this video. Tomorrow we will have the remainder 11 through 20 decks, so stay tuned for those every single Tuesday as per normal. And I'm likely going to be covering the PTCG Live Beta as well tomorrow, so stay tuned for all that good news. It's an exciting time to be a Pokemon TCG fan. In the comments below, let me know what you think your top 10 is going to be. There also will be in the pinned comment below, there's going to be the top 10 decks lists and reference videos for most, if not all of them. Give this video a thumbs up to help support the channel, it helps boost the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't already. We are just passing 9,700. Can we get those remaining 300 to get to 10K? Please help Zach out. It would be amazing. And yeah, let me know in the comments below what your top 10 is. That being said, we will find out exactly what's going on. So let's jump into our number 10 spot. You know what we always say? Let's get it. Intrepid Swording all the way into number 10 is Zacian Zamazenta. This deck is all about using Intrepid Sword, ripping energies onto Zacian, and attacking with Brave Blade relatively early. You also have Zamazenta V in for good measure. If you're playing against a Pokemon VMAX deck, you could block those VMAX damage with Dauntless Shield. So it's cool. It's a basic kind of beat 'em up deck, and there's cool things like a Rangaroo with Rotom Phone to kind of stack cards on top of your deck, gather things like Metal Saucer, and of course Crystal Cave and Cape of Toughness make this deck pretty bulky. I kind of like to call this deck like Budget Mew because it's relatively vicious and it has like that kind of vibe with it, like turn 2 Cross Fusion Strike Techno Blast is kind of the same thing as Bosses in Order with Brave Blade. Now, Josh Sutherland and Epo are really the ones that pretty much play this deck in the community. There's a few others, but they're the ones that see the most success. They've been kind of straying away from this deck. Maybe it's just because they're getting prepared for Brilliant Stars. That being said, I don't really see how this deck's going to fit in for Brilliant Stars. It might make in the top 20 as players kind of transition, but unless this deck can utilize Arceus, which I don't really see when and where, I just think that Zacian V might just kind of fall off on its own. It might be past that certain threshold. Maybe I'm wrong, and we'll have to see exactly what's going on, but I just don't think that Zacian V is going to really hold on in this format. Now, if you are interested in building this deck, or any other deck, and I mean, I'm not trying to talk down about any deck, I'm just giving you my straight up thoughts, you can always go to PTCGOstore.com, plug in code ZLesage5. That code's also in the description if you're trying to pick up any codes for Fusion Strike or Brilliant Stars or anything, and you can always trade or just get codes for PTCG Live, however it works out. But I get a little bit of a splashback from there. It does really help out support this channel. Galloping all the way into number 9 and falling from number 5 is Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX. This deck's about using Ride of the High King and just really being able to Ride of the High King and then go into a Max Lance. You don't want to go Max Lance then Ride of the High King because that's going to require you to take more energies, but just kind of look at your opponent's Pokemon and be like, am I getting the one shot? Yes or no? Or is my Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX getting knocked out? Yes or no? Those are really the factors that you got to think about when you're deciding between Ride of the High King and Max Lance. Of course, with how much damage you're going to be doing in the process. This deck sets up with the Shady Dealings, Drizzile line, and Quick Shooting, and you also have access to Melanie. I think it's not a bad deck. It's just one of those things where it's kind of too neutral for its own good. Doesn't necessarily always beat everything. It kind of struggles versus the metagame, but also does well against the metagame. I guess that makes sense. Like, it's a fair play, but that also means you're going to be fighting a little bit extra hard in some matchups, or you're going to be not having those free matchups when Mew runs into just a random deck in a tournament. So I think Ice Rider's cool. This deck does get much better for Brilliant Stars, so I do look forward to this deck with Arceus and Choice Belt spiking up in the list next week. So if you don't have these cards already, I totally recommend picking them up. For this last week of Fusion Strike, I wouldn't really recommend playing this deck. I do not think it's a suitable choice. The only suitable choices I think are going to be within the top 4 spots. Now, if you want to take a guess at what those 4 spots are, let me know in the comments below. Single striking all the way into number 8 and falling from previously at number 14 is Single Strike Urshifu VMAX. Now, I do want to let people know that I forgot to include this in the top 20 last week. I did recalculate it. Should have been around number 14, so that's where that number is coming from. I apologize. It's not anything against Single Strike. I know I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of this deck, but sometimes when you're doing with human calculations or doing these by hand, you are going to miss something. I missed a deck. I must have been blinking. That being said, Single Strike Urshifu is all about powering up your Pokemon with Houndoom's Single Strike Roar, accelerating to either Umbreon V, Umbreon VMAX, Single Strike Urshifu V, or Single Strike Urshifu VMAX, depending on the situation. Umbreon VMAX can gust things up with Dark Signal ability, or you can go through anything with G-Max one blow. It's relatively consistent. I think players are struggling between choosing between this deck with Gengar or this traditional single strike deck. With this deck not necessarily seeing as much success as Gengar builds, especially when compared to the Mew matchup. I do think it's something that we want to look into a little bit more. I don't know if this deck really grows with the Brilliant Stars format. I haven't necessarily got a chance to test this one out, but I do know that Gengar does get a little bit better there, so maybe this deck won't see as much success or a similar amount of success in our Brilliant Stars format. As we're playing this week, there's nothing really wrong with it. Again, it falls into more of a neutral category because it's not a strong enough dark deck or fighting type deck to hold its own in the formats. Skyscrapering over the rest of the competition, Duraludon VMAX strikes in at number 7, falling from, or actually going up for number 8. I'm doing my math backwards. This deck is on its way up. It's at 160 CP. Now, it is one of those things where I think Duraludon VMAX is kind of in the same position. I mean, 7 and 8 are very similar, especially if you look at the CP amounts. 8, 9, 10 are within 10, 20 CP of each other. So it's one of those things where Duraludon VMAX is in a similar place. Does that mean that it's going to strike this week? Well, as players let their guards down, that's when Skyscraper ability works with Duraludon VMAX so that you can stop your opponent from attacking it when they have special energies attached to them. Now, this deck takes kind of some attacking mid-range control element where you're healing with Team Yell Towel, giving yourself more HP, some disruption cards like Crushing Hammer, and Duraludon can do very well. Similar to Decidueye of the past, Duraludon VMAX is not going to be hot when your opponent's playing all these extra basic energies, like in Mew, or if your opponent's playing Path to the Peak to get around them. As decks like Gengar cut down on their Path to the Peak counts as there's less Duraludon, and Mew players cut their basic energies, I do think this deck has a chance to strike in the last week, and this might be the opportunity to play Duraludon VMAX. If you are playing in any kind of team challenge event, think about your local metagame. These are really the type of decks that can spike them. Decks like this, Stonjourner, Metagross, Victini, those are really the ones that can hold their own in those small kind of events. So if you are trying to make a spot on a team, this might be the choice. Kind of look at the metagame that you've played in the past few qualifiers and see what's going on. I think Duraludon has a chance to shine this week, and going forward into Brilliant Stars, I think there are quite a few Arceus builds. I know a lot of people like to hear Arceus. I'm pretty sure it's Arceus. Can anyone let me know in the comments below which is the best way to pronounce it, or which is the most official, especially with like the new game that just came out. I'm sure that there has to be a trailer that has an official thing. I'll have to check that up too, but let me know in the comments which one you think about that. But I think adding that in there, Starbirth ability sounds amazing to kind of accelerate energies and just kind of have a way to search a couple cards whenever you need them. Rapid striking it up all the way to number 6 is Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX. Now, this deck has moved up from number 11 and it's chilling at 170 CP, so just 10 more than Duraludon in number 7 spot. It's one of those things where I think Rapid Strike Urshifu has got kind of a bit of a weird reaction in our Fusion Strike metagame. Mew has so far been our best deck in format every single week of the entire Fusion Strike format, and we'll see if it is this week. I mean, we haven't seen it yet, so there's a real possibility that we're going to see Mew in the number 1 spot, but maybe we won't. We'll have to find out, and stay tuned. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments below if you think Mew is going to be number 1. Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX does have some good matches around it. It's one of those things where it should be Jolteon VMAX, it should be Gengar VMAX due to weakness, and that's probably what's really dragging it all the way to the top this week. We see Jolteon and Gengar have been pretty solid in the format, including Darkbox, which this deck also should have a pretty good matchup. Now, we actually saw the Melanie version kind of take a nosedive out of here, and players are now preferring Raihan and more of a traditional build. This is the build that a lot of top players are playing right now. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of this deck entirely. I'm way too worried about Mew, and I know this deck can beat Mew. I just don't necessarily feel like that's how it works in my experience. So maybe I have to use bring this deck back to the drawing board for my own testing purposes, or Rapid Strike Urshifu gets bought by Mew. Either or, we're going to see how this deck works in the next format. I know that in Brilliant Stars, Manaphy seems like it's going to be played in a few decks. A lot of players do not like losing to this deck, nor to Jolteon with that bench barrier type ability. But I still think that Rapid Strike Urshifu has ways around it, so we might see that deck pop up. However, play it with caution. Now, if you are playing in the Fusion Strike format events this week, I do think that Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX is not a bad choice, especially with Gengar, Darkbox, and Jolteon continuously seeing success in the past week, and we'll have to see where they rank this week. Also Rapid Striking it all the way to number 5 is another Rapid Strike Urshifu deck, this time with Galarian Moltres. Moving on up from number 7 last week, Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX with Galarian Moltres V. Now this deck's still going to be doing the same Gale Thrust, G-Max Rapid Flow strategy, but you also have access to Galarian Moltres V, which is a sizable attacker against Mew, giving yourself a closer matchup. I still don't think it necessarily helps with the matchup overall, especially playing against an experienced Mew player. We'll have to see if this can do anything. I mean, some players are playing it. This seems to be the more popular build. I don't necessarily think that this build holds its own against the metagame as much. I think that this build has a higher chance of losing to a deck such as Jolteon or Gengar or Darkbox, just due to more moving pieces in it. Now you can see that this build does not play the Inteleon line to search through things. It does play kind of a turbo build with Articuno V to pitch a couple cards away, draw extra cards, move energies around with Energy Switch. Like, it's not a bad build by any means, and it's super cool the way that it plays out, but it might not necessarily be as streamlined as the Rapid Strike Urshifu. I think this is just kind of sandwiching two decks together, but it doesn't really work out like peanut butter and jelly. It kind of, to me, it just seems like it's kind of like peanut butter and cheese or something weird like that. I don't know what to say. If anyone likes peanut butter and cheese, I'm sorry. But I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of this deck. I don't necessarily know why players are playing it, but I do know that it is at number 5, and it has been seeing success. So if anyone has been seeing success with this deck, let me know why you think you like this deck, or why you're seeing success with this deck. In my opinion, this is not the best Fighting in Dark deck. I do think that there are better choices in the metagame. We will get up there as we kind of advance through the rest of our top 10. Going forward, also, I think that in Brilliant Stars, the other Rapid Strike build might be better, because the Moltres doesn't necessarily counter Mew. Like, Mew might not necessarily see as much play as players experiment with other decks. Mew still might be the most played deck or the most successful deck, but I just feel like the format might be a little bit more varied going forward. Swooping in the shadows all the way to number 4 and dropping from number 3 this past week is Darkbox with Galarian Moltres, Sableye V, and Galarian Weezing. Now this deck's all about using Galarian Moltres after you've sacrificed a few prize cards such as Hoopa or Castform or Sobbles, and hitting with Fiery Wrath. Maybe you want to hit your opponent with Galarian Weezing, slow them down with Neutralizing Gas, and use Severe Poison to add some damage counters on them. You could also use Sableye V if there's enough damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon. Maybe you got those from Quick Shooting, or maybe you got those from something such as Severe Poison. You can attack with Crazy Claws after using Raihan. This deck has been kind of tearing it up. It's kind of had its own little peaks and valleys in our metagame. I think it's incredibly difficult to play, and it might not necessarily be my favorite choice in best of 1 due to some inconsistencies found in this deck. However, I do think it is one of the strongest decks available in our metagame, especially with the right pilot. The deck is incredibly hard to play. I know that I've made countless mistakes while playing this deck, but it is incredibly rewarding if you are able to capably play this deck, and I do think it gets better for Brilliant Stars, so it's a good solid play for this week. I think any deck from this point up, great choices for the rest of the Fusion Strike format, and this deck looks like it's going to get better with Manaphy so that you don't necessarily fold to Jolteon or Rapid Strike Urshifu. You could always get those Manaphy's back with Clara to protect your bench. I think this is one that you definitely want to pick up by all means. I just covered a video on it, and if you're looking for any kind of help when it comes to building this deck for Brilliant Stars, or any general help at all, by all means feel free to pick up some coaching from me at metafy.gg/@ZachLesage. I can definitely help you grow your game. I might not necessarily play this deck the absolute best, but there are quite a few other decks like Mew and Single Strike and a bunch of all of the other decks and Brilliant Stars decks that I can always help you grow as a player. Causing fear and panic all the way to number 3, and moving up a spot from number 4 last week is Gengar VMAX. Now, when I'm talking about decks that I think that are part dark and fighting, I know there's only one fighting Pokemon in here. I think this is the best way to play it right now, just in terms of type advantage over the metagame. Similar to Single Strike, this deck's all about using Houndoom's Single Strike Roar, accelerating energies, except this time you're powering them on Gengar VMAX. You can use Fear and Panic if your opponent has a bunch of V Pokemon in play. Yes, that's V-Star, V, VMAX, and V-Union Pokemon. Or you could just go G-Max Swallow Up to pretty much knock out anything in the game. A lot of players have this misconception that you always have to attack with Gengar VMAX, whereas most of the time I find myself attacking with Gengar V and Single Strike Urshifu V, because those are 2 prize card Pokemon. When you're playing against different decks, scale your prize cards to the Pokemon that your opponent's offering. So if you find yourself playing against a Single Strike deck, and they have a 2 prize card Pokemon out there, it's usually not a good idea to attack with a 3 prize card Pokemon. Sure, you might get the knockout, but if your opponent's able to respond with a knockout with a Single Strike Urshifu V, you are putting yourself behind the prize race. Your opponent's drawing prize cards at a higher rate than you. So doing some simple math, you'll likely lose that game. So when it comes down to it, think about the prize cards. Even against single prize card decks, this deck can scale down with prize cards to playing as Houndoom. So I think this is a really cool concept where you're able to build up a lot of damage. You have answers to common decks such as Duraludon VMAX. You can get through Skyscraper ability with Path to the Peak. This deck absolutely bobs Mew to the point where the matchup's almost free. I think Gengar is an excellent choice for anyone who hasn't tried it out. The deck can be a little bit clunky or bricky, but which deck is not in a best of 1 format? Going forward, I think that this is a great choice for the rest of the Fusion Strike format, and I think it's one of the best choices when it comes to our new Brilliant Stars decks. This deck with either Arceus, Choice Belt, Ultra Ball, all those kinds of things really breathe new life into this deck. Zapping all the way to number 2, and staying at number 2 for the entirety of the Fusion Strike format is Jolteon VMAX. Max Thunder Rumble is very similar to Rapid Strike Urshifu. You're trying to attack 2 Pokemon at once, and you can always try to double up on those prize cards and draw multiple prize cards in a turn with Quick Shooting Inteleon and Zigzagoon, which also activates the bench damage for Max Thunder Rumble. This deck does have the disruption cards of Path to the Peak, and you kind of have your own like cool text where you could use Elemental Badge to attack for 1 less energy, or Cheryl Heal, and I mean, this deck just kind of has it all and it's well refined. Jolteon VMAX is a wonderful deck choice, and it consistently does well at all of the late night series events. And lots of other events on Limitless, that is, too. Similar to Rapid Strike Urshifu, we do have to understand that Manaphy is coming out this week. In Brilliant Stars, that might be something to worry about. In my early testing, I found that Jolteon VMAX can get around that. So keep that in mind that a lot of these decks do have ways around it, especially with Quick Shooting and Zigzagoon. I do think that Jolteon VMAX is going to be a wonderful choice for the rest of our Fusion Strike format this next week, and I think it's going to be a solid kind of early starting point for our Brilliant Stars format, and we'll have to see where the format kind of grows from there. I think a lot of players might be attacking some fighting type Pokemon against Arceus V-Star, and of course we have to deal with Manaphy, so this deck might not necessarily be number 2, but if you are a Jolteon player, I do think that it's fine to play in our early Brilliant Stars format at the very least, and then we can all see what's going on with the metagame there, because I'm only one person, there's only so much testing and predictions I can do. Psychic leaping all the way to number 1, and number 1 for the entirety of the entire Fusion Strike format is Mew VMAX. Mew VMAX has absolutely been tearing it up, and it's the most vicious deck. You can see the jump from Jolteon's 560 CP to almost 3 times as much at Mew with 1400 CP. It's absolutely wild to watch. Mew VMAX has the ability, or the attack I should say, to use Cross Fusion Strike to copy any Fusion Strike Pokemon's attack in play. Now, this is the more popular build that we've seen lately, using Pokemon Catcher and switching cups to kind of always play cards, put cards on top of your deck, swap things with Rotom Phone, Pokemon Catcher plus Ellis' Sparkle knocking out your opponent's Pokemon. It's a very aggressive deck. On top of that, you can copy Psychic Leap to shuffle your Mew VMAX back into your deck. You can copy Max Miracle to go through anything. You can copy Technoblast to have a strong 210. You also have Melodious Echo that can attack as early on the first turn as Meloetta that you could power up with 3 Fusion Strike energies to knock out whatever you like. I kind of go on about Mew VMAX, and I feel like we talk about it a lot. Mew VMAX is an amazing deck. It's going to be amazing for the rest of the Fusion Strike format this upcoming week, and it's also going to be very good in our Brilliant Stars format, if not the best deck in that format as well, unless of course it gets countered by a bunch of new Dark decks. And I mean, even though the format does have decks like Gengar, Dark Box, Rapid Strike, Urshifu, Moltres, etc., Mew still remains on top because it has ways to outspeed those Pokemon and just kind of prove its power. With Ultra Ball and Double Turbo Energy and Choice Belt coming out in this deck, I don't really see why it's not going to keep its #1 spot for the foreseeable future. If you are attending any events such as Salt Lake City, or kind of playing in the late night events or anything, I do recommend picking up Mews for the Brilliant Stars formats. There you have it, peeps. We got Mew VMAX, Mew VMAX, the best deck in the format, as the best deck for the entire Fusion Strike format. So this is going to be our last week of Fusion Strike. Next week we are going to be moving on to Brilliant Stars, and hopefully it changes some things up. I know there's probably going to be a few familiar decks up there, but I'm really excited for Arceus V-Star Pokemon in general, and a lot new playable decks. And this is the place to be at, because I will be covering it all. From the PTCG Live beta, because I am Canadian, lucky me, let's go Zach. I will be covering that. I will be covering Brilliant Stars format. I've been picking up a lot of Brilliant Stars codes. By any means, if anyone has any extras, by all means, feel free to DM me. I will offer you deckless hookup access for the month of March, if you can hook me up with some codes. And by all means, it's one of those things where it's an exciting time to be a Pokemon player. New set, new app, new microphone. I mean, not only did I get my new Mac, I got the new microphone, got the new camera. We got a lot of cool things going on in the channel, so it's a great place to be. Give this video a thumbs up, help boost the YouTube algorithm. Let's get to those 10K. Subscribe if you haven't already. Double check to say if you haven't subscribed already. It would mean the world. And let me know in the comments below what type of content you want to see with Brilliant Stars, which decks you are expecting to be in the top 10 Brilliant Stars decks next week, etc., etc. If you're looking to pick up any Brilliant Stars codes, go to PTCGOstore.com, plug in code Lesage5 to save 5% on your next order of codes. You can also go to metafy.gg/@ZachLesage if you want to pick up some coaching, whether you're getting ready for Salt Lake City, the next late night event, or anything. I can always help you grow as a player. I've turned player into regional, international, and even a world champion in the making. So it's one of those things where there's a lot of great things that I can show you in the game, and I really hope that I can help you on your Pokemon journey. Any questions, by all means, DM me on Discord or Twitter. I'll catch up with everyone tomorrow. Like I said, probably double upload day with the top 11 through 20 decks that we're always going to continue on with Brilliant Stars format, and likely a demo of the PTCG Live beta that we're going to be getting in Canada. So I'll catch up with everyone later. Peace out and have yourself a great week. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. And my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video and have yourself a great day. Thanks.